Okay, so if you've been watching the AI market at all, you have seen this absolute explosion, right? But here's the thing. The obvious plays aren't always the smartest ones. Today, we're going to follow a really clear a signal coming from the world's most valuable company, and it points directly to where the real money is in this AI gold rush.
All right, just to put a pin in this, we're looking at everything as of March 1st, 2026. This isn't some far-off prediction. This is about what's happening on the ground right now.
And, we got to do this part, the standard disclaimer. This is all for informational purposes. It is not financial advice. Please, please do your own research. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into the thesis.
All right, so I know your time is super valuable, so we're going to flip the script a little bit here. We're actually starting with the conclusion. Yeah, the bottom line, right up front.
So here it is, plain and simple. The conclusion is that memory stocks, well, they're basically sitting on what looks like a guaranteed gold mine for at least the next 1 to 2 years. Now, I know that's a bold claim, so let's break down the evidence that makes this case just so compelling.
So how do we get there? Well, first we'll look at what I'm calling the NVIDIA signal. Then we're going to break down the 3 main pillars here. First, the absolutely insatiable demand from AI. Second, how future sales are already locked in. And third, the unmatched pricing power these companies now have. And then we'll wrap it all up with the final takeaway for you.
Okay, so our entire thesis, everything we're about to talk about, it all starts with one company, NVIDIA. Look, when the most valuable company in the world makes a big strategic move, it's not just a ripple, it's a tidal wave. And we're going to show you exactly how the memory companies are perfectly positioned to ride that wave.
And just to be crystal clear, we are not talking about small players here. We are talking about absolute titans of industry. I mean, look at these market caps. Samsung has blown past $1 trillion. $1 trillion. And SK Hynix and Micron, they're both pushing $500 billion. These aren't just chip makers. They are the very bedrock of the digital world, and their importance is about to go through the roof.
All right, so our first big point, demand. And I'm not just talking about strong demand. This is a desperate, absolutely insatiable need for the one component that pretty much acts as a governor on all AI growth. Without this piece, the whole industry just hits a brick wall.
To really get a sense of this hunger, just look at this number. NVIDIA's last quarterly revenue was over $68 billion. Now think about that. That entire economic engine, all $68 billion of it, is completely and utterly dependent on a single component to even function.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. This is a direct quote from NVIDIA's own earnings call. They explicitly said that the most critical governor on their growth, the one thing holding them back, is the supply of high-bandwidth memory, or HBM. Without enough HBM, the entire AI revolution just grinds to a halt. This makes the HBM suppliers the most critical partners in all of tech right now. Period.
Okay, so we've established massive demand. But the question is it sustainable? And this brings us to our second point, which honestly, for us as investors, is maybe the most compelling part. NVIDIA is actively de-risking this entire thesis for us by guaranteeing future sales.
So how are they doing that? It's all about this prepayment strategy. NVIDIA is literally taking its mountains of cash and paying for HBM, not for next quarter, but for years in advance. They aren't just buying chips, they're buying certainty.
And just look at this timeline. This isn't some short-term mandate. NVIDIA has gone on record. They've publicly confirmed that these prepayments, these are guaranteed sales for memory companies, now stretch all the way into 2027. That's not a forecast, folks. That is a locked-in, multi-year revenue stream.
And if you need any more proof of just how urgent this is, check this out. The CEO of NVIDIA didn't just call his counterpart at SK Hynix. He personally hosted a private dinner for their engineers. And his one big request? 0 delays on the next generation of memory. I mean, this has gone way beyond a simple business partnership. This is about critical dependency.
Okay, so demand is through the roof and sales are locked in for years to come. That brings us to our third and final pillar, the absolutely unmatched pricing power this whole situation creates for the memory makers. Let's really look at who holds all the cards here.
You know, when demand is basically infinite and supply is very finite, prices only do one thing. They go up. And they're going up fast. The cost of HBM is surging so much that some are calling it a cost crisis for other tech companies, with prices jumping 20% or even more. It's just classic, textbook supply and demand.
But that leads to the million-dollar question, or in this case, the trillion-dollar question, right? At some point, the price has to get too high, even for a behemoth like NVIDIA, or does it?
Boom, here's your answer. A staggering 75.2% gross margin. With profits like that, NVIDIA can afford any price hike. They just absorb the cost without even blinking and pass it straight on to their own customers, who are just as desperate. This is the very definition of a price inelastic market. The customer has to buy, no matter what it costs.
So here's the crucial takeaway on this. NVIDIA doesn't really care about the price because they just pass it on. They've even said they expect to be the first and only consumer of the next-gen HBM4. What does that do? It forces the memory makers to prioritize NVIDIA's production lines above all else, and that dries up the supply for the rest of the market, which gives the memory makers even more leverage to dictate prices to everyone else. It's just this perfect feedback loop of profit. Okay, let's bring this all home for your final takeaway. We started with the conclusion, right? And now you've seen the building blocks, the evidence that makes the case for this guaranteed gold mine.
It's really a simple three-step logic. Step 1. The insane AI demand makes HBM pretty much the most critical component on the planet. Step 2. NVIDIA is so desperate for it, they are paying years in advance, locking in that revenue. And Step 3. This whole dynamic gives the memory makers unprecedented, almost total control over pricing.
You know, it's the oldest rule of any gold rush, right? Don't dig for the gold, sell the picks and shovels. Well, in the AI gold rush, high bandwidth memory is the only shovel that works, and the companies selling it are the ones who are guaranteed to profit from this whole thing.
So that really just leaves us with one final thought. With demand guaranteed, supply lockdown, and pricing power firmly in their hands, the investment case here is pretty darn clear. The only question left for you to figure out is, which one of these giants is going to win the most?